Hey, welcome to the 1138 podcast, a podcast where I interview people I know who have lived great lives for God. My hope is to encourage you to go forward in the name of Jesus with your life. The world is not worthy of my guests, and I hope you're encouraged as you listen. My name is Rudy, and thanks for catching up with me. I'm excited to bring you this interview with a new friend of mine, Victoria Moore. She and her mom, Stephanie, were very kind to join me in telling me their remarkable story of how God saved Victoria's life as a young child. You're not going to want to miss these details. Her story has so many similarities to my dad's story that when I met her earlier this year in January, I just hoped that she would come on the podcast, and she agreed. So you're in for a treat today. Have a listen. Well, I am honored today to have Victoria, a new friend of mine since January, and her mom, Stephanie, visiting, I think, from California. Yeah. And this podcast, as y'all know, I've been trying to interview friends of mine. Typically, they've been older friends of mine that I've known for 20 something years or stuff. But, Victoria and I met back in January, and she was, I'm grateful to her. She's been grace-filled enough to come onto this podcast. So thank y'all for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So Victoria, when we met, something stood out to me. So you guys picked me up in my driveway. We were going up to the mountains for a church retreat. And we were with Michaela and Caleb, who just got married this Saturday. I just did their wedding. And I remember them saying, well, we have Victoria with us. And I'm like, oh, I don't know Victoria. But you introduced yourself right away. You made me feel comfortable in the car. And then you started kind of hinting at your story. And I just thought, oh, my goodness, we need to see if she'll be willing to be on the podcast. And then I thought, that was January. So then I thought, okay, I haven't heard from you in a while. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. Then you texted me and said, hey, do you want to do the podcast? And I'm like, yes, that'd be great. And so for me, I remember thinking your kindness was evident right away. Your generosity, your creativity was evident right away. We kind of struck a few chords with, man, we like art and, different storytelling and all that. But I started this podcast with the intention of helping people be encouraged to go forward in the name of Jesus. And Hebrews 11:38 says that the world was not worthy of them when it's speaking of all these unnamed believers in Jesus all over the centuries. And so when I think of any Christian, I just think, yeah, the world is not worthy of you. So Victoria, what do you think of that?
Oh, it's beautiful. I had no idea when Michaela asked me on this trip. She's like, we're going to the snow. And I thought, oh, I'm going to go to the snow. And it's this retreat. And I didn't even think anything of it. I don't know why I didn't ask, but I just thought, okay, yeah, that sounds great. And I need to make new friends. And I need to make new friends because I'm here in Colorado and new to the area and don't have like a community necessarily of my own. So I decided to go. And thankfully, the Lord blessed me, of course, there too. So all of it is wonderful, and I'm grateful that I went.
Yeah, we are too. It's been fun getting to know you.
Yeah.
So okay, so like I mentioned, we don't know each other that well, really. Okay. And so for all the listeners, I've had a few of my friends ask, do we know her? Because I've told them I was gonna have you get on this podcast. And I've said, no, you don't know her. In fact, I don't really know her either. And I definitely don't know Stephanie because I just met her now. And so Stephanie and Victoria, if y'all could tell us a little bit about yourself, like what are y'all up to? What do you do? Tell us about your life.
Victoria's originally from California. I live in California now. We farm almonds. We live in the Central Valley between Fresno and Bakersfield. If that gives you sort of an idea of where we are, we're in the San Joaquin Valley, where all the fruits, vegetables, nuts, everything are from. So we're from there. Victoria came out here, lived here for a couple of years, and I drove her back because she had come out to celebrate for her sister's birthday in February. Then the virus hit, then the shutdown happened. She was in California, and there was no point in coming this way.
Mm-hmm.
She had had eaten everything before she came. She was planning on leaving 10 days. Everything closed down. Just stay here. So I drove a couple of weeks ago, and here we are. By profession, I'm a registered nurse now. Not working right now. I'm 55. I'm ready to kind of slow down a little bit.
Great.
And
she was inspired by my story and the nurses who took care of me to become a registered nurse.
Wow.
And before that, just a housewife and mother, and perfectly fine doing that. But I thought, I can do this. I need to do this. So that's why I went back to school after.
And she's awesome for doing it too.
So
that's incredible. I don't think I remember that part of the story.
Yeah. So
there's so many facets. I was just thinking too before, because I got nervous, thinking, I don't know. And that's also, I know, the devil trying to tell me not to share my story, like pushing it. And not that I allow, but I knew that was something that scares me, like being afraid and frightened of coming and sharing more so. And other people, like my mom's side of the story. Yeah, it's so, you shared it.
Don't let your light shine.
So often, but
it's very natural, but to do it
in this forum,
this kind of setting.
It's nothing that I've done before. And I don't, So.
The middle, she has an older brother and then a younger sister. Brother's 3 years older. And
I'll be 29 in a few days. On Thursday.
No way. Hey, happy early birthday.
Thank you. And my sister is 9 years younger than I am, so there's kind of a gap. So growing up, I was right in the middle, and grew up in the middle of nowhere on the ranch, a farm kid, and swimming in ditches and playing in dirt and, being outside. That's what we did. And bicycle riding. And we had a few friends who were neighbors that were ranches away. They weren't our neighbors. They weren't neighbors like Colorado right next door. They were
right
down the road with their own ranch. So that's how I grew up and loved it. Loved every minute of growing up that way. So my dad still farms down at that ranch, but my parents don't live in that area anymore. They moved to town, which is not much more of a town than, I don't know.
But it's different.
So
anyway, here we are.
Yes.
I think I told you we were planning a trip to California in March. My first time since I was 5 years old, so I don't remember ever going to California. And we were gonna go out there, and then the virus hit, and everything was shutting down. It was not shut down at that time, but we decided to not make the trip. And then I think what happened is, the week we would have been there, everything was shutting down as the days progressed. So we would have wound up just driving along and eating on the side of the road. Yeah. So I was glad we didn't go, but I'm still really sad. I'm still like looking forward to going. And the way you've described where you grew up, I just, in my mind, I can picture these just beautiful fields and orchards, and oh man, it's gorgeous in my mind. So I hope to see it someday, that area at least. So yeah.
Too for there.
Yes.
You don't want to go in August.
Yeah, I remember you saying that it's very hot and stuffy and all that. So okay, so that's helpful. A great little introduction to where you grew up, and middle child. We have a middle child, and she always tells us like, I'm the middle child. She has those kind of feelings. So
both she was the baby for so long, so she has both those traits. She's very much the family and then the middle child, and where She grew up as a child, was down on the ranch. The youngest was not born there. She doesn't know anything of that. So they have different
Wow.
experiences.
Our childhood
Oh,
is completely different.
I
So
didn't. Yeah, that makes sense then. Oh, wow.
the same traits of an only child and the baby of the family.
Mm-hmm.
There's such
Yeah.
a gap.
Mm-hmm. Now, how long will you stay in Colorado, Stephanie? Or are you intending to
I,
kind of wait it out, or are you going to head back?
yeah, well, I mean, I enjoy being here. I wish everything were open. I'd love to go to the, all the little stores and shops around here. And we've done some walking and hiking just here near her house.
Mm-hmm.
Love being here. I'll probably be here through her birthday, and then head out after that. I've been here, it'll be 3 weeks, end of this week. And,
Okay.
I need to get back. I really
Mm-hmm.
like to be here too.
Yeah.
I
Oh.
want to be here too. Everyone wants to be here. It's like
It's starting the
It's
growing season, and I've been gone and
busy
doing
at
some
the
stuff,
farm.
helping her get stuff situated here so that she can be really present,
Mm-hmm.
enjoying being here.
I still have a foot in California. Like I was like kind of just leaning there because the community. I didn't
It's
have a real
familiar to
community.
her.
Well, and I have my people, whatever community. I've started to get a community here, so it's
Mhm.
taken a while, but it's fine. I'm finally starting to feel like this is home, and not California. It's taken a while, but
Well, and the pandemic doesn't help, right?
Yeah.
Because then you can't really visit as much, and
Yeah.
that's a hard transition. We have a son going off to college, hope Lord willing, in the fall, and that's one of those things we're wondering about. It's like, it's one thing to move somewhere and get established. It's a whole other thing to try to do that virtually, and it's just I feel for you. That's
Yeah.
difficult. We've been here 2 years, and we still other outside of our church, we have a few friends for sure, but it's we're still building our home here, if you will. So
Yeah.
yeah. Well, let's get into some of the backstory, even more so of the backstory. When we met, again, I haven't actually heard your whole story. I know you told a little bit in the car, and that's what intrigued me. And I just thought, wow. And I think I told you about my dad having I don't know if I told you that or not, but my dad having some phenomenal stories of the spiritual and the physical, and just Jesus rescuing his life. And that's how I grew up. I grew up with that story as a part of my life. And so when I heard your story and just the remarkable story that it is, I just thought, oh man, Victoria, again, back to, all of this, but I'd love to hear more of that. And so I'm really grateful, even Stephanie as mom. I mean, you obviously, gosh, I got a video from Victoria a couple of days ago for all you listeners, and you won't get to see this most likely, but Victoria sent me this little video of her as a kid sometime after the accident. And my heart was breaking in those 10 seconds that you showed me. I mean, it is, as a listener today, you're in for a treat to hear a remarkable story of a remarkable young woman and family, and how God really rescues people. So take it away. Tell us your story.
Yeah, I'm touching on the video that I sent you. I wanted to give you, because you see how encouraging I am now, I wanted to show you who I was after my accident. I was completely broken and had no identity in Christ, or how to use what God was putting me through at 10 years old. I mean, I had no idea how I was supposed to use that for good. I was so frustrated and broken and sad. So I wanted to show you like who I was and how far I've come, because I'm not that person anymore. Thankfully, like the Lord used me in ways and showed me ways to like make my story positive, because I was broken for a long time.
And you were a kid. You were a
kid.
Tender, small. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we'll go back, but
yeah. And so it was a Sunday morning, where we live in the town that we live in, our home at that time was on a half an acre, and my parents lived next door on an acre. And Victoria had went to spend the night down in the town where we have our farm. It's farm country, and she went down to stay with some family friends. Their oldest daughter, it was her birthday, so she was very excited to go down to help decorate, and she went with her best friend Matthew, my best friend Pam, and her husband Rusty. So Victoria had gone on down there, and you know, it was a regular night at home. That night when she was away, my youngest daughter was 11 months old at the time, and I had fixed Victoria's hair with a commercial curling iron, curled it because she wanted to look good for the party and all. And in my rush, I had unplugged the curling iron. A commercial curling iron gets much hotter than a regular curling iron that you get at, you know, CVS, Walmart, whatever. Well, my youngest had, crawled in there, walked in there, and grabbed the barrel of the iron and had burned her palm. That was the worst injury that any of my children had ever had. I had spent the night holding ice on her because nothing you can do, you know, and she was crying, and I just held ice on her and rocked her and all that. And, you know, so
at that point, she's 11 months old. She's not. She's just not even.
Her birthday was February 25th, so this is January 21st, 2001. And so the next morning, get up, you know, I walk over to my mom and dad's to do something, I don't know. And while I was over there, the phone rang, and I answered it. And it was my husband, and he was yelling, like, Victoria got hit by a truck. Now, my husband would always call me and do these prank jokes and like act like he was, you know, somebody else and have an accent and all that. And so, you know, he says this, and I said, you know, you're joking, you know. And he said, I wouldn't joke about something like this. And he hung up on me. And then I knew, you know, this is not a joke kind of a thing, you know. And so I turned to my mom and I said, Victoria's been hit by a truck. And I got to go home. And I started to go out the kitchen, the back door. And I had stopped and I said, we need to pray right now. And I had grabbed her hands and I had just said a prayer to, you know, ask God to send, you know, comfort and aid, send your angels to surround her and lift her up. And so then I went home, you know, ran on home, threw on, I don't remember, I'm sure I wasn't dressed. I don't remember now. I'm sure I did back years, but, and I had called a friend of mine. So this is, you know, activity that, you know, we're going to go. Randy, by the time I've got home, my husband has called his dad, who lived down where this accident was. His family lived on his parents lived on the property that we all farmed. And his dad to go over to the shops and, you know, Victoria's been hit. We don't know anything. Go over there. He's a mile away. And so I had placed a call to my friend who was on the hospital board at the time. And I, you know, I don't know anything. I need somebody to help because at that time, I'm not a registered nurse at that time. So I don't know, you know, all the jargon. I need help. I'm looking for help. And so we went, they had to bring Victoria to our town, which was a 20-minute ride on the highway from where she was. So my father-in-law gets over there. We can hear her crying on the phone, and she's angry, you know, and Victoria was never an angry child, ever. She was always a very good, positive. She was extremely talented. She was she was a dancer, a talented dancer that was picked out of, you know, when she was 3 to be in a little trio, and, you know, in the Nutcracker as Clara, you know, when she's a little child, very smart in school, a leader, all things. So we hear her being crying over the phone, talking what, you know, going down to the hospital. And so that makes me feel better because I think she's crying. She's, broke her leg because we didn't know where this happens. We don't know if it's a silage truck, if it's a 18-wheeler, if it's a little Toyota pickup. We have no idea when this call comes because the oldest daughter, the girl that had the birthday, is the one who made the call to my husband. So she was hysterical. My husband takes the call, then he's hysterical. It's just like the snowball. And so I hear her crying, and I'm like, this is good. We can deal with this. Something's broken. She's coherent. She's alive. And so then we're waiting at the hospital. We drive down to the hospital. My friend comes down. The people start showing up at the hospital. The ambulance finally shows up, and they open the back of the ambulance, and they're bringing her out. Now she's quiet. There's no sound. And my friend who was on the hospital board was a registered nurse, was an ICU nurse. She recognizes what I don't recognize. This concerns her, that consciousness has changed. Then she's waking up. She's got the C-collar on, all this stuff. She's screaming and she's clawing at stuff. And then she goes silent. They're taking her into the ER. We're in this ER room. There's all this stuff going on. The ER doc comes in, and she's waking up, going out, waking up. And he comes in immediately and says, how long has this been going on, to the EMT paramedic? And he's, well, actually, he said 5 minutes out of Tulare this started. And he says, we need to intubate and you need to leave. He looks at my husband and I, and everything changed. And, there's all these, and so we went out, and, then I'm talking to my friend, things are, then I realized this is not good. This is, bad again. So I had, there's a little chapel. Our hospital at that time was very small, less than 200 beds, I think. But there was a little chapel, and I knew that. I mean, everybody used that hospital. I had plenty of people die there, family, that sort of thing. So I went to the hospital. I went into the chapel, and I prostrated myself on the floor, and I prayed, and I said, God, please don't take my little girl. But if you do, give me the strength that I know I don't have.
Wow.
And this peace just washed over me as I'm lying there. And the peace that passes understanding. Because, you're talking, a half hour, 45 minutes have passed. Everything is just swirled and peaked and ebbed and flowed and freaked out and all of that. And I was just flipping out. And my mom had come in, and the mother of her best friend, my best friend, had come, and they had laid on my arms and were crying and praying because they saw what I was doing. And then we walked, and I was fine. I said, I'm fine. God's here. I'm fine. I'm all right. Now I had to ask for that peace again 5 minutes later. And I asked and I asked and I asked, and it always came. So I thought, I can't do this anymore. It always came. It never failed. Because I can't describe how emotionally spun out I could get. Just sheer panic. And so anyway, it goes from, we're going to keep her here. It's because I want her to go to the Children's Hospital, Madera, that's an hour north of us. And they're no, we don't want to, we need to keep her here. We're going to get an MRI. We think this is better for her. We don't want to move her. She's been in too much trauma. So what happens is, what we find out through, just things going, crazy things. Oh, I forgot. One, of course, my friend is friends with the nurses there because she had worked at that hospital at one time for many years.
Mm.
One of the nurses there she was the one, it was actually a nurse that was there that actually had told my friend ahead of time. And this is why some of this early emotion stuff had gone on too, was that then my friend had went in and said, what's going on? Because we had been sent out, and she said she's got the raccoon eye. She's got the raccoon eye. She said she has to have a basilar skull fracture, which is a cracking from the back here, and then all the coming up. That's indicative of a skull fracture of that nature. So what ended up happening was that, come to find out, she had been run over by the truck that the kids were in. Now, the best friend was 3 years old. The best friend was my son's age, 3 years older than Victoria, but he and Victoria were just best friends from the time they met out. Victoria was 18 months old.
Mm-hmm.
And he had been, now farm kids drive vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
We're not worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
They're raised that way.
Mm-hmm.
A cousin that was visiting, a town kid, city kid, and they had been out on the ranch. It had rained a lot that year. So there was a lot of rain, there was a lot of water, and it had rained a couple of nights before that.
Mm-hmm.
And the dirt road had been sanded. So there was a lot of sand on it. And then it's rain. Well, they were out looking for these puppies. They were trying to get them. The Matthew that knew how to drive the truck and was big enough to drive the truck had been driving the truck. Then they had gotten out and were trying to herd these puppies. And Victoria was out with him. And then Matthew had got in the back of the truck. The cousin had gotten in the driver's seat. She was 10. And
Matthew said I was running. I was running
along the dirt road in front and going after these puppies, and the cousin had gotten into the truck and probably couldn't effectively see over the hood, over the dashboard, and then over the hood. And Victoria was running, and she just kept driving, and Victoria had fallen in front. She hit her, fell, and the truck tire actually ran over Victoria's head. It literally ran over her head, and her hair, she had really long hair, and her part of her hair had wrapped in the wheel well and had helped flip her over that truck underneath that wheel as it went over her.
Oh my goodness.
She had tire marks over her face. So her head, it would be like it had rolled over, but it had give this sanding and the wet had helped cushion that.
Mm-hmm.
Her head had been fractured, her skull had been fractured all over. It was like if you took a boiled egg and rolled it on a hard surface, and it just cracked, but none of it penetrated the egg, which would have been the inside of the egg, her brain, but it was cracked all over, and nothing fallen off or broken off in any piece. Intact, but it was just cracked all over. Skull from the back of her skull over to all the way to the front. She had her eye socket had been crushed, broken all over. It was fractured all over. She had her ethmoid, sphenoid. All of her ventricles had been had fluid. It was bad.
my kneecap and my collarbone.
And those weren't even an issue,
Yeah. You just deal with that. That's.
And the night before, my youngest had a burn on her hand, and I went from that to this, and so they took her in to do an MRI, and then when they got her into the MRI, that's when they realized, or CAT scan. They don't have an MRI there. They had a CAT scan, and it was out in a outside, sea train or whatever. It wasn't within the hospital. They had to wheel her out physically outside and put her in like a, what do you call them, where they're like a,
A gurney?
no, where you have, like, if you have a school room that you
Like
put.
a mobile, yeah.
So that's the word I apologize. And so they took her out there. Matthew's mother had called the priest, and the priest had come and give extreme unction while she was in, which in layman's term, they call it last rites.
Last rites, yeah.
Because it was just bad. And he had come and he was so moved, and he was like, it was.
This is the end.
The priest had, like, because she was just little, and you could see the tire marks on her face, and anyway.
I look at 9-year-olds now and think how itty bitty, like, I don't understand how I survived a Ford truck. I don't get it. When I meet 9-year-olds, and I was 9, it's just.
And it sounds fantastic. How could you be run over by a tire and let your head literally be run over by a tire? So she gets out, and then they come out, and they're going to life flight her to Children's Hospital. And, they're preparing us, they're preparing her. We have a liaison, a social worker come and talk, is talking to us, because it's all bad. It's all bad. They tell us, you need to go home, grab a change of clothes, and then they let us they let us go in, because they tell us we don't know if she'll survive the flight. And so we have to run home, and then it starts this terror cycle over again. And we go home, I go into her bedroom, I can smell her, and I just fall apart again. I can smell her, and I think, am I going to see her alive again? And I pray again, and the peace comes. Literally, physically, it washes over me. It's not an abstract. It's not esoteric. It physically holds me up. I start walking. So we drive.
I'm getting like goosebumps. Just, I mean, golly.
And it's so long since we sat down and really told this story. I know I've lost things, and we always said we need to write it down, and you have the best of intentions, and then you just have to do things that get in the way. Life gets in the way in a lot of ways. But so we have to drive. It's going to be at least 45 minutes before we can get up to this hospital, and different people are driving. I'm able to go. I'm doing things. Things are getting done. I know what I got to get this up, and then I fall apart, and then I pray, and then so somebody else is driving, and at that, we had our cell phone, and I made 6 calls on that drive. And I had to make 6. I needed to get people praying. I needed to get people telling other people to pray. So I called 6 people, different faiths, all Christians, but different faiths. And they just started praying. And you could feel it. Feel it. So we get up there. We're in the parking lot. By this, we're up there. We're just astonished, because those calls that I had made, people had called other people. There were 50 people at the hospital waiting, to help. And so we get there, the helicopter comes in, and we don't know. We're waiting with bated breath. Is she, did she make it? And you can't go past this line to anything, and she's coming off, and the trauma team is, bringing her in, and one of the nurses, as they're wheeling her in, gives me the thumbs up. I knew exactly what she meant. She's alive. So we can't go in. She's in the ER, blah, blah, blah. More people are coming. I'm praying again. People are, asking different things. And so they finally, after they get another social worker, another liaison, they take my husband and I into a little room. And it's bad when they're taken into this part of the hospital, it's little room, And then the pediatric neurosurgeon and another doctor come in. And then they tell us that we can't see her yet. They're getting her all set up. And so that he tells us, all of her injuries and how bad it is. And if she can last 48 hours, they might have something to work with. Well, if she doesn't last, she'll be dead within 48 hours if she lasts. She has swelling on the brain. She's in a coma. She probably won't, she may not walk again. She may be blind. Her occipital lobe, everything, everything looks bad. But they're doing their best and, prepare to be here for 6 months at a minimum, if she lets it. So then they let us go in. And she has tubes everywhere, and her head has swollen to the size of a basketball. Which just, and she's silent, and tubes, the tube down her throat, her hair, there's just blood. And they didn't let anybody in. And then so my husband and I are in there for, they told us before we can go in and nobody can see her. And then after that, and they say, all these people are here, they can come in 2 at a time. And I thought, wonderful. But at that time, I realized after the fact, as soon as the last person had come in, I realized they're letting them come in to say goodbye. They're not doing this to be nice to,
this isn't, you're not out of the heart.
I'm not thinking in those terms, but as soon as then I realized this is like these are goodbyes. They're letting these, and then again, have to ask for, and so that's where it started. One of the people that I had called, it was hours and hours later. It was stormy then. We were emotionally exhausted, not physically so much at that time, but somebody had brought a fifth wheel trailer and had put it in the parking lot. There's, because it's a children's hospital, they have places to stay, but they also have these like RV parking spots, people that are there. There was a trailer there. It had been loaded with food. There were prayer cards in there. People are really, really fundamentally good. I didn't know who the person was that filled it up with food and water. But they heard somebody had called to say this 9-year-old girl needs your prayers. And they did. And so for 3 days, for me, so Victoria was never alone when she was put in the ICU by herself. We had somebody in the room with her all the time. She was never alone. And she was, in a coma, and they kept her in the coma as well. She had gone into the coma, and they kept her medically induced because her brain was swelling. And so, and they didn't know what they were going to do. So I was actually in the room, other than when I had to go to the bathroom or something, and praying constantly, and people coming and kind of just a lot of a blur. And on the third night, and a nurse had come on. It was a different nurse. And I mean, we know nothing. This has never happened to anybody we know or anything like that about medical stuff. And this nurse had come on, and I was in the room. It was just me in the room with her. And she was angry because Victoria had, her hair was matted. There was mud, there was blood. Her teeth had swollen. I thought her teeth were mangled from like getting knocked out of her. They weren't, they were swollen, they were like this. And she was just swelling and, just bruised and everything. Anyway, this nurse comes in and she's angry because Victoria's blood pressure was high. And she said, this means she's in pain and she should be medicated. Because those numbers have been like that, she should be medicated. She's in pain. That's telling me she's in pain. And so she gives her some meds and the pain and the blood pressure comes down. And then she starts, because this whole time we're praying, please take care of, my baby and our precious, wonderful angel, and then she comes in, and so she gives her the meds, she calms down, and then she starts washing her. Washing her face and moving her hair back, and she's cleaning her up, and she's getting a toothette, which is looks like a popsicle, but the popsicle, it's a sponge, and she's washing Victoria's teeth, and Victoria's moaning. Victoria's very much a
tactile. I love
creature of comfort. She loves to be petted and loves all these. So this woman comes in, and with her knowledge and her care, is able to minister not only to her but to me as her mother. And then I can leave, because I have not left the room in 3 days, other than I can't eat, I can't sleep, I never sleep. And she comes in and she's doing these things, and I say, I can go to sleep. And I went out. I was finally there's a motorhome out there, it's sort of our general area where people congregate, and I can go sleep now. I have a reprieve. And so then we get onto sort of a routine. It's my mom, my husband, my husband's sister. She had worked at the post office in the town not far from where the hospital was. So she'd get off work, she'd come and take a shift at night, late in the morning, whatever, and we would rotate like that. And so all things are happening. And so every day I'm giving updates to certain key people on the phone, what we're praying for specifically that day. Up until that third day, that's what, and, for us to help us get through this, and her. And then it becomes that Victoria's nose is running. What it was cerebral spinal fluid was dripping out of her nose, because everything was just cracked. It
has to go, yeah.
So it's coming, and it can come out of these fractures. So they're saying, we've got to stop this at some point. And it was a week. It was 5 or 6 days that they had said, if that doesn't stop, we're going to have to go in and remove her. They're going to take her face off and go in and repair this to stop this. They're going to have to repair this fracture. They want it to heal on its own. Well, let me go back before that. Before that, in the first 3 days, 4 days, it's the pressure in the brain. If that doesn't subside and the swelling continues, they're going to go in and do a shunt, or they're going to take out a piece of the skull and leave it open so that it has play. So that's a specific prayer. Please tell the prayer chain, tell your people to pray for this, that this does not happen, that she does not need this. And so that doesn't happen. And then it's going to be, her nose is dripping. It's leaking cerebral spinal. We can't do that. We're going to have to go in, lift her face up, repair that, put it back. It's going to be fine. Every one of these that we do, it can be done. It's not what you want to hear, but we can take care of it. So that's a specific prayer. So it's late one night, and the next day they're going to do the surgery on her, because this leaking hasn't stopped. And this is a teaching hospital. So their doctors are coming around with these student doctors, residents, groups of people. And I can hear them outside the room talking. I can hear the pediatric neurosurgeon outside, and he's talking about the blah, 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 blah. I can hear him, and the mom doesn't know. I hear the family doesn't know. Mom's in there. She doesn't know. And I need to go in and talk to her. And so he comes in by himself, and he's telling me that Victoria has developed diabetes insipidus. And he said that means she's not producing the hormone that controls her fluid levels, her water. So the outside of the skull was cracked, the inside there's fluid on the ventricles, the eye socket is completely mangled all the way around, and inside where the pituitary, so inside the brain, the force was such that it shears the pituitary gland, and that's what causes the diabetes insipidus. And so he's saying she's going to have to take DDAVP, because otherwise when she would wake up, she would not necessarily have the thirst mechanism that you or I would have, where, oh, I'm thirsty. And you're already beyond thirsty when you in your brain, you think, I need some water. You're already dehydrated, but she would not have that. Plus, she could not hold her urine. It would just come out, and she would not know to replenish and be dehydrated. This would be an ongoing, lifelong problem. Well, I'm terrified, great. No, this is, and there's a tear rolling, I'm tired and emotionally exhausted and all of this, and there's this tear rolling down my face, and I'm great, and the neurosurgeon, he wipes the tear off. He says, but don't you see? He said, now we don't have to do the surgery. Because it's right up on its own. Rose had stopped dripping because she had developed diabetes insipidus, which allowed her skull her body to sort of,
heal.
So that it's starting to heal. So my prayers were answered.
Yeah. Wow.
Just not in the way that I thought they would be answered. Take that. That's doable. That became my mantra. That's doable. That's doable.
That's doable. Wow.
That's doable. Okay. So you got to take a peel. Big deal.
Right.
We deal with that. So it was things like that. I mean, this is a huge hospital with, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 levels. I don't remember. At that time, I think 3 and 1 and 4, and you could get lost in there. I mean, I can stop in the middle of the road where we're from and hang out there for a half an hour. So this is, big city.
Big city, yeah.
There was one that I was really struggling, and I was just starting to panic and spin out, and I don't know how I ended up on the wrong floor in front of the chapel of this hospital, which was way bigger area for people to go talk to God, where you can talk to God anywhere. But, just sort of that, it was just another confirmation. There was, it wasn't the Pietà, but it was Mary holding baby Jesus. There's like this sculpture in front of that. And I'm lost, but I'm not lost. I'm lost in the hospital. I'm emotionally lost. I'm spiritually lost. And then in front of me, like you're in front of me, is a mother and child speaking to me and giving me strength again. Over and over and over. Miracle after miracle that sustains me is like manna from heaven. And so it's 8 days, and there's people, Victoria's godfather some friends, the husband of my friend at the original hospital that was the
Nurse.
They come up because they're there all the time. And Victoria's, her Glasgow Coma Scale was at a 3. You want it to be, a normal which is a indicator of how the brain is functioning, what's there, just wise brain function. 8's bad, 3's really bad. And she was at a 3 for a while. And you want that number to grow higher. 15 is, so somebody's with her all the time. We're getting to where we're changing people out. I gotta go home and I gotta take care of my son. I gotta make arrangements for him. We did not stay home from the time we got that call. We went home once to get some more clothes, do some stuff, come back. 2 hours tops. But people were sending prayer books, prayer cards, rosaries, Bibles. People are praying, their churches are sending us things that that they're doing on Sunday. Masses are being said, all these things. And the Bible is in there, in the room with her, everything. She can't have anything in the room that's sent. No balloons, no flowers, no anything that everything's sterile. But we can have the book by us, the Bible with us, or whatever. But Joe is in the room with her, and let me go back in the ICU, and then she's in ICU, and then I don't know, 8 days later she goes into like a step down ICU. But before that, about the 8th day or whatever, one of the nurses comes in and they're trying to get her to respond, trying to get Victoria to respond. Squeeze the hand, do and she starts finally, making noises. They're sort of lightening up her meds because they want her to wake up if they can. Let me go back before that. See, I haven't told this story in a while. So it's the second day that she's there. I take that back. So it's the second day, late second day. They want to extubate her. Pediatric neurosurgeon comes in. They want to take it out. They want to see if she can breathe on her own. You're good. They want to try this. They'll immediately intubate her if she doesn't do it. So that's a prayer. That's a specific prayer that we want her to be able to breathe on her own. So they extubate her, and she breathes. She breathes on her. This is a sigh. And so it was after that the nurse had come in and was angry because she was dirty. You have your priorities. It's not a priority to clean her up when they need her a machine to breathe for her. So we're not in the room. Joe's a Christian. He's a believer. He's in the room with her. They're lightening up her meds. They want to see how conscious is she on her own. And so they're constantly checking her Glasgow Coma Scale and coming in, and she's, she can squeeze or whatever. Her collarbone's broken. They're not that's a collarbone. We have all, how many of that? That's not a problem. But she responds a little bit, but she will not move her legs. She doesn't move her legs. And she's pushing against it. Can you push against? And Victoria won't. She's not participating. And I get very, and I'm worried because I want that number higher. I want that Glasgow scale higher. And so I tell Victoria, I said, Victoria, she thinks you're weak. I'm in her ear like that. She thinks you're weak. She doesn't think you can do it. Now, Victoria was a very gifted ballet dancer. From the time she's 3 years old, she's had lessons and done, all this. I mean, she thinks she can't do it.
So you're like coaching her up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she, she's not there. And I said, if you can press against her hand with your leg, do it now. And she goes, oh, and just knocks her back. And she said, and the nurse just starts saying, good girl, good job, Mom. And so the number goes up because she's able to, even though she's not awake and she's not able to verbalize, she's answering to commands. And that's when I knew Victoria's there. She's fighting. She's fighting. So
can I ask what day was that? Did you say, was that around day 8?
21st. So it was
2001.
2001 was the accident. So that was, I have certain things written down, and my mom wrote on this date, this happened. It was probably about day 6, 7, 8. It was something like that. I take that back. That was early on. That was maybe day 5.
Okay.
That where she kicks her, where she responds to, she's angry and wants to, okay, leave me alone. I did it.
So to make sure I understand, so she was hit by a truck, and about 5 days later, she's already responding?
Yes. Yes.
Golly. Okay.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Not hit by a truck. Her head was run over. Physically run over by a truck.
She's already, that's a fighter. You've got a 9-year-old. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, and then maybe it's 2 days later. I think it was on the 8th. It was on the 8th day. I do know this. I do know. The 8th day, we're in the room. They want her to open her eyes. Can you open your eyes? Now, she was so swollen and just black, and her eyes were, and her teeth, and it was awful. It's amazing what the human body can go through. Mm-hmm. So the nurse is in there, and she's a young woman. She's probably 22, 23, and she's being really kind to her and wants her to open her eyes, and she won't open. And then finally, Victoria says, and I'm down. The nurse is down because she's got to record, and she's down. I'm down, and my husband's over the top of me, and Victoria's on the bed. And can she open her eyes? The nurse is trying to prompt her, and I said, "Can you open your eyes?" And then Victoria, her voice was a different voice than what she had, and she finally speaks. It's, "I want to see you." And I said, "I'm right here, baby. I'm right here. I'm right. You can hear me. I'm right here. Look at me. Open your eyes. I'm just right here." And my husband's, "Open your eyes, baby. Mama's right here, and we're right here. We're waiting for you to open your eyes." And just she turns just ever so slightly, and one eye opens. The right eye opens. And we just fell out. I said, there you are, because the green over, she has green eyes, and her eyes opened, and it was just that one eye, and she started crying, and we started crying, and the nurse started crying because we had been waiting for that. And she immediately fell back to sleep. That was exhausting to her, just exhausting. And so that was another specific prayer request that we had put out. And so it was, I don't know, 9-10 days later. She's waking up, but she's in and out. She can't stay awake. She just can't. She talks with her eyes closed. Her voice is real high. It's a different voice. And she's like a very little girl, a lot older than she was. We don't care. We don't care what she's like. They had told us. Joe's in the room with her. She starts talking. She's crying. He's the only one in the room with her. And she's talking like this. It's me, Victoria. It's Joe, and she knows who Joe is. But she's very tired. And is the Bible in here? Now, she has not been away.
I said, get the Bible.
Get the Bible. She didn't say, is there?
I said, get the Bible.
Get the Bible. And he says, okay, she's talking. This is shocking to him. And he's, get the Bible, get the Bible. And I got it. And she says, open it. And he opens it. And she puts your hand in. Now close it. And then she starts sobbing. And he says, why are you crying, Victoria? And she said, because it's telling me to. They're telling me to. And he's a believer. He's raised Catholic, cradle to grave. He's not a non-believer. But he was moved and shocked by it, by how specific and clear she was about it.
Well, thanks for listening to part 1 of Victoria and Stephanie's story. And it's an amazing story, and there's a second part coming soon. So thanks for tuning in today. If you're enjoying this podcast, please don't forget to subscribe and pass on the news that we're doing this podcast to help people go forward in the name of Jesus. So I hope that today's story really has helped you do that and has strengthened all of our faith. Thanks to Victoria and to Stephanie for their time, and I look forward to getting part 2 of this episode up here pretty soon. So until then, enjoy the day in the Lord. Go forward in the name of Jesus, and I will talk to you again soon. Thanks for listening.